with the 40 manager. We're going to talk about some HA stuff, high availability. We're going to talk about some of the web filtering, the antivirus, the IPS type stuff, and how that was configured. So I know in the previous demo, what we did is we kind of showed you where it was at a little bit, and that's fine. But we're going to talk about it in a little more depth, not a whole lot in this slide deck. So let's get started. So we're talking about the 40 manager HA cluster. 40 manager, not the 40 gate. We're talking about the 40 manager HA cluster. We're talking about some of the synchronization stuff between the HA cluster members, how to recover a failed device. We're going to configure 40 manager or 40 guard on the 40 manager. Understand the purpose of server-wide override mode, and talk about some of the different devices with the local 40 guard server, and troubleshoot some of the 40 guard issues. The 40 guard is your IPS and all that fun stuff. So let's get to it. So high availability, even with the 40 manager. So with the high availability, what you're doing is just like everything else. We have our firewalls. Typically, firewalls are in a firewall pair. Everywhere you go, it's always a primary, secondary. With the 40 manager itself, it's designed to have one primary, multiple secondary, 4 to 5 devices in total, depending on the model. Now, they have geographical redundancy. So this is really cool. When you do FortiGate or any firewall, you typically have local redundancy. You have a primary and a secondary at your local site, and then you may have a backup site for disaster recovery. This is, what most companies have. 40 Manager, to a certain respect, is the same way. So what they have is you have a primary device that is your primary 40 Manager. However, you can do geographical redundancy across the planet, anywhere that has the ability to have internet access. So this performs the same function as your DR type scenario. So you can have a primary 40 manager, say in Nashville, and you could have your secondary 40 manager down here with me in Orlando, Florida. And then you could have a third device over in Europe, a fourth device in Australia, and a fifth device in Guam, if you wanted there. 29 palms. For you guys, military guys, you'll know that reference, right? Each HA member operates independently. Each HA member has a unique IP address for each 40 manager. So they don't roll IPs. They have the same IP, or they're individual IPs, I should say. Upgrading the primary also upgrades the secondaries at the same time. So I know a lot of places what you try to do is you upgrade the backup, and then you promote the backup to primary, and then you update the old primary, which is now the backup, so on and so forth. Not that way with the 40 manager. You upgrade the primary, pushes down the upgrade down to all the secondaries. So the process is similar to a standalone upgrade. You just log in, connect, and perform your upgrade. So when you do this, your 40 manager operations are temporarily interrupted during the upgrade. Obviously, if you're doing the upgrade, you're doing the reboots, people should not be logged in. They shouldn't be doing things, and nothing can happen when a 40 manager is being upgraded. And when an upgrade does happen, the device is rebooted gracefully. There's where that term comes from. Now, when you make a change on the primary and sync to the secondary, you replicate the databases. Now, if something goes wrong, you promote the secondary to the primary. That's what they're talking about. That's how we do this. So you have your primary, it's going great. We replicate out to the secondary. Something goes wrong with the primary, the secondary is promoted to as a primary. So when things are synced, all device configurations, including the global databases, are updated. They're all in sync. All your configuration revisions, everything's in sync. Now, when they're not sync, it could be your interfaces, your routes, your HA, your SNMP, your logs, your FODs, your 40 analyzer, your 40 guard, your antivirus, IPS, web filter, anti-spam, all this different stuff can be out of sync. This is not sync. When your FortiGate sends logs to your 40 manager, that type of stuff can also be considered out of sync. So primary fails. Must manually reconfigure a secondary to primary. It is not an auto process. So you must manually reconfigure the secondary to primary. You must reconfigure all secondary to point to the new primary. Reboot's not necessary. So if the primary goes down, you've got to log in to one of your secondary devices, whichever one may be, and you say you are now the primary. Then you log into all of your secondary devices and you say this is the new primary that you will be taking updates from. There is not an auto process on this. Now, if the secondary fails, on the primary, you just remove it from the secondary list. So you can leave configs on, so when the secondary comes online, it can resync, but you remove it from the list. But you can leave the configs there. You just remove it from the list of secondary devices. So you may do this if you are upgrading a new secondary device. Maybe you're doing something on it for whatever reason, and you just pull it out of the primary list. You do your thing, whatever you're going to do, bring it back online, push the config down to it, and re-add it to the secondary list. Now, this is where you configure inside of your system settings HA. Inside of your system settings HA, this is where you will configure your IPs. This one here is in failover mode. It's in manual. It's not VRRP, virtual, I think that's virtual route redundancy protocol. It is in manual mode. This is a primary device. Operation primary. This is not a standalone. This is not a secondary. This is primary. So what you'll do is configure your IPv4, your IP address, and the serial number. Again, back to serial numbers. So in there, and then there's different things that we can configure inside of our HA status, but this is our basic stuff. We go into HA, we select the mode, manual, I am secondary device, I am a standalone device, I am a primary device. Primary, then you want to configure your peer IPs, such, and then just do the install there. Now, HA status. When you look in your dashboards, you look under HA, you can see here that it lists your status as a secondary and primary. So if we look there at the serial numbers, it will give you the serial numbers, say which is primary, which is secondary. So what you can do is also go diagnose HA status, and that will give you your cluster status from a command line perspective. So again, guess what you can do? You could script that if you wanted to. So if you have some type of script you want to run to check your HA status on a regular basis, diagnose HA status, it will give you your cluster. So this right here, this FortiGate manager is operated as a secondary. So if we look there in the status, we are the secondary. All changes config can only be made on the primary. So this is telling us right here, if you log in and you look at it, this is saying, hey, we can't make changes here. We have to go to the primary to make changes. So some of the sync failure check stuff that you can do, you need to verify TCP port 5119 connectivity. So you can diagnose sniffer packet port 5119. Again, guess what? We're back to diagnosing our sniffer, diagnosing our packets to make sure that our connectivity is there. So one of the things that you may do with your network is you may need to look at your network and ensure the port 5199 is indeed permitted throughout your network. You can check your alert messages in your event logs under your system settings in your dashboard and your event logs. You can debug your HA daemon. So again, diagnose, debug, application HA for your HA daemon 255, and then you enable it. And then you can see if there's a pending sync, you can diagnose HA stats. So this allows you to go in and look at your HA status and see what is going on. What status are we in on our HA? So you can force a resync. So on the primary, you can force a full resync to all secondary. And if you're on a secondary, only resyncs to that secondary. So think about what you're saying there. If you're on a primary, I resync to everybody. If I've got 4 different secondaries, I can resync to all of them. If I'm on the secondary, the only thing I can do is resync to myself. I can't resync anybody else. So it's just kind of a limitation of how they have this set up so you're not overwriting other devices. FortiGuard. So we download all our antivirus IPS packages, web filter, email filter, databases on the FortiManager. That is what FortiGuard is. FortiGuard is your antivirus, your IPS packages, your web filter, and your email filter. So this is where your next generation firewall comes into play. So as we showed in the previous demos, what did we see? We saw source, destination, port number as the mainstay of the rule. Now, with those rules, it allowed us to be able to come in and add different types of things: antivirus, IPS, web filtering, emailing, things on that lines. Email filter, I should say. So the reason they download it local is instead of reaching out to the web and doing the filter through the web and passing all the traffic back and forth, it downloads it local so you do your local check. This is the power of your next generation. So some vendors, and there's some things out there that you can actually send your data out to the web. They will scrub it. They will send it back to you. They will say it's clean, and then you send it off, which is fine. And they can have all the processing power in the world up on their environment to do so. But the reality is you're sending it across the public internet. You're sending it out and back in. Doing so, you're going to have latency. It's just the way it is. Maybe minimal, but it does exist. What we're doing here is we're downloading it all locally so we don't have that latency. It's right here on our package. We're going to be able to check it right here, right now. So we can redistribute these packages to multiple devices out. Remember, we upgrade primary, gets pushed down to the secondary, right? In some high security instances, internet access from internal FortiGate is restricted. So again, we talked about this earlier, some of the stuff of maybe some of your ADOMs and stuff are in a DoD environment. That is where I see the big restrictions when you start working with the Department of Defense, military. Some of you guys, yes, if you have a security clearance, there are opportunities out there for you, especially if you have like a TSSCI. You have that, I would get your certifications as quickly as you can and start putting your resume out there, because you'll have access to these highly restricted devices that other individuals will not. So your FortiManager is your local FortiGuard. You connected FortiGuard servers. It downloads the license status from the managed devices. There you go, right there. Managed devices, your FortiGates. The FortiGuard downloads your license status. It syncs to FortiGuard packages unless configured for a closed network operation, like we just talked about. You can cache available firmware updates on managed devices. Doesn't mean they're installed, but you cache the update locally. You can act as a downstream FortiGuard, providing antivirus, web filtering, things like that. So if someone doesn't have public internet access, maybe they connect to you for that downstream connectivity. In HA, each FortiManager acts as its own individual FortiGuard server. So again, if you're on the primary, you're connected to the primary. If you're connected to the secondary, that data is there. Each HA member independently downloads and provides these services. So it downloads it internally. So if one goes down, you immediately have that same data and updates on your new device. So some of the terminology you're going to hear here, quite honestly, you're going to, unless you write this down and use it every day, you're going to Google it like the rest of us do. FDS, antivirus, and IPS. That kind of goes hand in hand. FGD is your web filter and email filter. This is on your FortiGates. On your Forti client, here you go, your endpoint, your clients. FCT is your antivirus and IPS, and your FGC is your web filter and email filter. And then you have what they call your FDN, your public FortiGuard distribution network. Now, we don't talk about the end clients a whole lot in this course. That's outside the scope of here. But I can tell you from experience that with like the EMS and things like that, you have the ability to ensure that your devices have certain versions of FCT, the antivirus and IPSs, and things on that line. So a lot of this I see used for your bring your own device. So people log in on their own device into the FortiGate world. They install EMS on their endpoint. They connect to the VPN and installs it, and then it does all the checks to make sure the antivirus, the IPS, the web filter, and email filter are indeed installed on that machine. And basically, if your device connects to the company network, the company network owns that device for a lot of purposes. So be mindful when you bring your own device, because company can be very picky on what they allow and don't allow, and it's your personal device, so there can be some conflicts there. But we're going to talk about the FortiGate, the FDS and FGD, the antivirus and IPS, and your web and email filtering. So you use 443 to obtain updates from the public FortiGate distribution network, and you use to replicate it. So we look here, here's your processes. These are your processes in the websites you're going to connect to. So the process FDS link D, you're going to connect to the FDS1Fortinet.com, the US FDSN1Fortinet.com for your US based restricted servers. Your FGD, your email and web filtering. This is your guard.fortinet and your QSVR fortinet.net. These is where you're going to download that from, and those are your processes on your FortiGate devices. Now, over on your Forti clients, your endpoints, you're going to have the same processes. And we look, the websites are a little bit different based upon what you're going to connect to. So your websites for your endpoint is different than the websites on your FortiGate devices. So enabling your built-in FDS, your built-in FortiGuard. So 2 steps. You got to enable the service access settings on interface, typically your outside interface, and then enable the FortiGuard service itself. So you need to say, okay, outside interface, we're going to enable service access settings on this interface. We're going to allow this. Now, once we enable that, we say, hey, you can do this, then we're going to enable the FortiGuard service itself. So first you have to tell the interface, hey, you can do this, and then you tell the FortiGate firewall or the FortiGuard service to say, hey, turn this on. So enable service access settings for each interface. If you're going to do that, you can enable following services: antivirus, IPS, web filter, email filter. This allows that next generation protection. So your web filter, this is huge because there are a bunch of known blacklisted sites out there. So instead of you trying to create a rule for it, you do my internal network out to the internet, HTTP, HTTPS, permitted. I permit it. However, what I do is I now do a web filter. And that web filter has all the blacklist sites on it that I don't want my people going to. And I can also select, no pornography, no gambling, no hacking sites, no, whatever, so that you filter that out from that level based upon your needs. By default, communication with the public FDN is enabled on FortiManager, and you could change the configuration between global or US-based servers depending upon your needs. So I see a lot of the requirements for US-based servers when you're dealing with some type of restricted environment. Antivirus and IPS must be enabled and supported by the FortiManager firmware versions. They are enabled together. So if you're going to use one, it enables both. Updates available for the FortiGate, FortiClient, FortiFOS, your FortiAnalyzer, and FortiMail. Different things that you can enable the antivirus and IPS on. So if you guys don't know, antivirus is going to look for particular signatures. And your IPS also has signature-based stuff, but also some of the IPS has the ability to go in and look for patterns. So some of, for lack of better terms, AI. So some of your IPS has the ability to do that. It's pretty cool. You can schedule your updates, right? By default, updates performed every 10 minutes. So you're going to see this every 10 minutes. Your servers or your FortiManager is going to jump out and it's going to say, hey, I need an update. You got an update? Send it to me. And when it sends an update, it only sends the new stuff. So if you've got version 9.9 and then 9.91 comes out because there's a new threat, you are only going to get the difference between 9.9 and 9.91. So they try to keep this update as quickly as possible because of what is called a zero-day attack. If you guys have not heard that, any zero-day vulnerabilities that come out, that means it's not public notice yet. A lot of people have never heard of it yet. If FortiGate has a fix for it, a block for it, something like that, it will push it down and you're protected before you even know. Now, the challenge with this is, like we said before, they make updates and stuff. And I saw this on a Apple connectivity in using FortiGate across their VPNs. What happened was they made an update to EMS and it throttled all bandwidth for Apple devices using VPNs into the FortiGate environment. So when they performed this update, it shut them down. So you had an option. It didn't shut them down, it throttled the bandwidth. So you had an option. You either rolled back to previous and then shut down your updates, or you just dealt with the throttled VPN bandwidth until FortiGate put a fix out. So that does happen. I've seen that happen. And it was because of a security, kind of glitch, little bug there with how FortiGate interacted with Apple. They got it fixed within a couple of days and off we went. But the security outweighed the bandwidth concern. So the company I was with at that time, we waited. You can also push updates by default to FortiManager context FTS on the schedule. Push updates allow urgent updates to be pushed directly by the FortiManager when they become available. So you can go out and just push whenever you want. So if the push updates fail, if the FortiManager is behind a NAT due to it sending its IP. So what they're talking about here is if you're getting your pushes from the FDN, they do it every 10 minutes. If you wanted an update, out to the public internet and you want it faster, you can have challenges if you're behind a NAT because you're sending your IP out. And if the IP doesn't match what is inside of the FDN, now you got IP versus serial number, and that whole conflict comes back into play and to bite you. So again, got to be mindful with the NATing, how it's done, where it's done, and how it might affect you in your network. Package management, receive status. What this does allows you to go in and look at your package. So you can go into FortiGuard here and look at your receive status. Here it's going to list the packages that have been pushed down to you. You can look at it. You can see the size of it. You can see when what it was pushed, right? What's the name of it? What's the product? FortiManager in this case. What's the version? Things along that lines are all here. You can look at the service status. This is your antivirus and IPS update services are enabled together. So again, now we look at this. The previous slide was a FortiManager. Now this time we're looking at our device type. We're looking at our firewalls themselves. So, looks like a switcher was upgraded. Looks like our FOS was upgraded. So you can see there that the data was pushed down to those devices through the FortiManager FortiGuard process. Web filtering. So first time can take several hours to download because the list is pretty intense. There's three main processes: the FGD linkd, that's for downloading; the FGD UPS, that's your database merging and consolidating Delta files into larger ones; and your FGD SRV. This is your servers and web filter and email request. So a couple different things there. But the big thing what you get out of this is when you first turn this on, your first download, if you look at it and go, man, this is going to take 6 hours. Well, join a club, go get something to eat, relax. It's just the way it is. Because the internet is a mean, nasty place. And if you are not careful, there are hackers out there right now waiting for you to be impatient. They're absolutely waiting for you to be impatient. And if you don't do things like that, you will get caught. There's only two types of companies on the internet: those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. Always have that mentality, have the patience, have the, just the discipline to download all these updates and get them pushed out everywhere. Now, as a tech, I know that you're going to look at it and say, well, I'll download it, take 6 hours. That's, it's what we're going to do. It's the customer pushing you to make something live in 2 instead of 6 because they don't want to wait. Just got to push back on that and explain to them that it could take several hours the first time. Now, after the first time, it doesn't take several hours. It's just quick updates, but the first time can be time consuming. Some of your query server management stuff here. We can go in here. We can look at our FortiGuard. We can look at our statuses here, and we can look at some of our queries and things like that. Like right here, our top 10 devices or sites that we're going to, our top 10 devices. This allows us to look at, in a GUI standpoint, of the status of what's going on. Now, you can override stuff, right? So if you need to connect your FortiManagers to specific FDN servers on the internet, you can override. You can connect to downstream FortiManager to another upstream 40 manager to download updates. So what they're talking about here is if you've got kind of a tiered approach where you have a downstream device for whatever reason, that you can log in and connect to the upstream, not the public internet one, to get your updates. You can override your server addresses for your antivirus, your IPS, your web filter, your email filter, things on that lines. Email filter, this is extremely important. I see a lot of hacks coming in nowadays through email. People, they have that prince from Nigeria that's going to give you, $40 million if you just click this link. Don't do it. It's not true. Okay. And if it is, remember me, and reach out to me if you get that 40 mil. But I'm not going to wait on that. Don't click on the email links, please. Here's where we connect our server override. We come into here and we just click our server override. We tell it, hey, we want to override the server. And we put our particular IP address in there that we want. This is under our FortiGuard in settings tab. License status. So here's what I find all the time. So you buy your licenses. And this isn't just with licenses. This is a lot of things that happen in the real world. So you buy the license and you look here, everything's up and good and running. And we see there is a subscription there in red. Well, I find a lot of times what the subscription in red comes from is because somebody forgot to pay the bill. There's supposed to be some type of auto update and FortiGate tried to bill out and it didn't, and it killed the subscription. Happens a lot. I've seen entire networks brought down because somebody forgot to pay the ISP. It just happens. So this here is a good place for you to go in and look at your licenses, being able to see what's red and what's green, what's configured and not. Because before you try to troubleshoot something, make sure the license is valid. You need to have that validity, that check before you can ever even think about configuring anything. Firmware cache, again, downloading all your firmware. And you see here, you have the ability to download it. Just because you download it doesn't mean it's going to be installed. So you may want to download it and stage it for an install at a later time. So if you know that you have a holiday weekend coming up and people are going to work over the holiday weekend to do a firmware upgrade, 2 weeks before, you may go download the firmware, do a quick walkthrough of how you're going to do it, screenshot how you're going to do it, and then, generate your change request to your internal company, however that's going to work. Show them all the screenshots, show them it's downloaded, so that when you go to do the update, you're just clicking a few buttons versus waiting for it to download, because that can be time consuming, especially if it's a multi-hop update. So upgrading your firmware, you can do for individual devices, you can do from the system information widget. For multiple devices, you can go to the device manager pane and select multiple devices to upgrade at the same time. Basically, your firmware on a group. You can schedule your firmware upgrades, right? So you can do this on a schedule if you would like. I don't know of anybody that does. If you do, God bless. But I don't know of anybody that schedules these upgrades unless things go by themselves. It is a manual process with a lot of checks and backups before we do an upgrade, and then verification after an upgrade is over. But if you want to do, you can schedule it. You can go to firmware templates, device manager, under your firmware templates, and that is an available option. Now, verify your configuration, right? So, execute ping, again, verify it's there. Get your FM update from the public network. So we want to look there, make sure it is enabled. And then we want to make sure that our service itself is enabled. So we have to enable the public update first, and then we look at the service to make sure the service itself is enabled. So we want to diagnose the update so we can view service list. And again, our FTS, FCT, FGD, FGC, FTMR based upon what you are trying to do, whether it's antivirus, and email filtering, whatever, based if it's a FortiGate device, based if it is an endpoint device, whatever. You want to check your status. So what you'll do is update status for that particular service that you're going to look, and you can diagnose the DB contact. You will list contract information for all your devices. So this here, when you look at your contract information, you're going to go by device serial number so that you can get your contract information license. So troubleshooting, show version. It'll show you your last update. And remember, we're doing our FortiGate service status here, not our FortiOS when we do our show version. And we want to do our show FortiGuard server from which FortiGate is trying to download updates. So this here, we're going to do our debug. We're going to look and make sure we have basic connectivity. And then we're going to execute update now. This is the same as what we did in the GUI, where you were able to go in and tell it you want to update now. You can do the same thing from the firewall, from the command line. So in the end, guys, if we look, there are a lot of HA stuff you can do. We talked about, ways to synchronize between your cluster members, because it is the primary that pushes down to all the secondaries. If you're a secondary, you only update yourself. Recover failed device. If it is the primary, you promote the secondary to a primary, to all the others that, hey, we got a new primary. If it is a secondary device, you just remove it. A couple different ways to do that to get that back in the rotation for a secondary device. You configure your FortiGuard settings on your FortiManager. Basically tell it to talk to FortiGate and say, hey, FortiNet, I should say. And, we have all our licenses here. So we want to download our web filter, our email filter, our antivirus, our IPS, and all that. So we can server override that address. So if we want to push to a different server, we can manually tell it who we want. We can configure the FortiGate devices to use FortiManager as the local FortiGuard server. And we can just different types of troubleshooting issues there. So what we did here really is a real high 99-mile overview of some of the troubleshooting stuff. But I hope what this does is gives you a baseline of being able to go in and look at various things that you can configure them, troubleshoot them, and start the process in your network of being able to recover from different types of failures and incidents. I mean, I hope this, helps you with your test. But reality for me, the test, anybody can pass the test, but it takes a tech to be able to work in the field. And that's why they pay us the money they pay us. Well, with that, guys, I appreciate you coming out and look forward to talking to you in another video.